Zarathil stood at the viewing port and watched the human ship grow larger. Her crystal body caught the light from the stars and split it into tiny rainbows. She had been waiting for this moment for 3 standard cycles. The humans were coming. The ship they called New Horizon looked different from other vessels. Most ships in the galaxy were smooth and quiet, built for long trips between stars. The human ship had sharp edges and bright lights. Even from far away, Zarathil could see it moving with purpose, like it was eager to arrive. She touched her datapad with one crystalline finger. Her job was simple. Study the humans, learn how they think, write reports for the Catherian Collective. Her people needed to know if humans could be trusted as allies. Other species had warned them about humans. The Zenthari said humans were too loud. The Maloki said they moved too fast. The ancient Vorth claimed humans burned with strange fire that made them dangerous. But warnings were not facts. Zarathil would discover the truth herself. The docking bay filled with the sound of metal connecting to metal. Zarathil made her way through the corridors of Serenity's edge. Other aliens moved aside as she passed. Her people commanded respect throughout the galaxy. They were known for their logic and their careful thinking. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the human ship first. Zarathil watched him from the observation deck above the docking bay. He was shorter than she expected, with dark hair and bright eyes that seemed to look at everything at once. When he smiled at the greeting committee, his whole face changed. It was not the polite expression most species use during first contact. It was something else, something that reached his eyes. "Welcome to Serenity's Edge," said Ambassador Krell, the station's diplomatic leader. His words were formal and correct. Jake Morrison grinned wider. "Thank you for having us. This is incredible. The size of this station, the technology, the design. It's amazing. We've dreamed of this moment for generations." Zarathil tilted her head. The human captain spoke about the station like it was beautiful art, not just a place to live and work. His voice carried energy that made other aliens step back slightly. Even his crew seemed affected by it. They stood straighter when he spoke. More humans came off the ship. Commander Amy Stevens walked with quick steps, her head turning to look at everything. Chief Engineer Ben Carter pointed at ceiling panels and spoke rapidly to another human about power distribution systems. Dr. Lisa Yang carried 3 datapads and was already taking readings of the air. They were so active, so aware. Most species moved through space with calm efficiency. Humans moved like they expected something wonderful to happen at any moment. Zarathil followed the group as they moved through the station. Ambassador Krell led them to their quarters, explaining protocols and procedures. The humans listened, but they also looked at everything else. They noticed details that other visitors ignored. They asked questions about things that had nothing to do with their mission. "What kind of plant is that?" Amy Stevens asked about a common oxygen-producing vine. "How many species live on this station?" Ben Carter wanted to know. "Can we see the engine room later?" Dr. Yang asked before they had even reached their rooms. Krell answered their questions with growing confusion. Most diplomats focused on important matters: treaties, trade agreements, military capabilities. These humans seemed just as interested in the food systems and the recreational facilities. That evening, Zarathil attended the welcome dinner. She sat at the observers' table and watched the humans interact with other species. This was when she first understood that something was different about them. A Zenthari merchant told a story about a failed business deal. Other aliens nodded politely and made appropriate sounds of sympathy. Jake Morrison leaned forward and asked detailed questions. How had the merchant tried to save the deal? What had he learned from the experience? Would he try again? The questions were not polite conversation. The human captain truly wanted to know. He listened to the answers like they mattered to him personally. When a young Maloki engineer mentioned problems with her ship's navigation system, Ben Carter immediately offered to help. He drew diagrams on his napkin and explained 3 different solutions. He became so excited about the technical problem that other humans had to remind him to eat his food. Dr. Yang spent an hour talking to a Catherian researcher about crystal growth patterns. Not because it related to her work, but because she found it fascinating. Her eyes lit up with each new piece of information like she had discovered treasure. Zarathil made notes on her datapad. Subject species displays unusual levels of interest in matters outside their immediate concerns. They engage with other species not for political advantage but for personal satisfaction. They ask questions not to gather intelligence but to satisfy curiosity. The strangest moment came when Amy Stevens talked to a Vorth elder about his homeworld. The elder described the beautiful singing crystals that grew in their mountain caves. Amy listened with such attention that the elder began to speak more freely than Zarathil had ever seen from his species. "Your people must miss the crystal songs when you travel," Amy said. The Vorth elder's tentacles trembled with emotion. "Few beings understand this. We carry recordings, but they are not the same as being there." "I understand," Amy said softly. "We have places on Earth that call to us too. Places that live in our hearts even when we're among the stars." The elder stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unprecedented. He shared a crystal song recording with her. Not the simple tourist version that most aliens received, but a deep song full of meaning and memory. Other aliens at the table looked shocked. The Vorth rarely shared their sacred music with outsiders. But Amy Stevens had somehow reached through the barriers between species and found common ground. Later that night, Zarathil reviewed her notes. The humans had done nothing wrong during the dinner. They had been polite and respectful. But they had also been something else. Something that made other species react differently. They burned brighter than other beings. They felt things more deeply. They cared about things that logic said should not matter to them. When they spoke, energy seemed to flow from them like heat from a star. Zarathil looked out at the human ship through her window. Lights moved behind its windows as the crew prepared for sleep. But she doubted they would rest quietly. Even in sleep, she suspected, humans burned with that strange inner fire that made them so different from everyone else. She would study them more carefully tomorrow. She would learn what made them burn so fierce. The next morning, Zarathil began her real work. She followed the humans as they explored the station during the cultural exchange period. Ambassador Krell had given them freedom to visit most areas of Serenity's Edge. He wanted them to feel welcome and learn about galactic civilization. Zarathil expected the humans to focus on important things: military technology, trade opportunities, scientific advances. Instead, she found Jake Morrison in the food production center, talking excitedly with the Zenthari farming supervisor about soil chemistry. "On Earth, we learned that different plants need different minerals," Jake explained, his hands moving as he spoke. "We had to experiment for thousands of years to get it right. How do you manage nutrition for so many different species?" The supervisor, who normally gave short answers to visitors, found himself explaining complex growing systems. Jake listened like every word was important. He asked follow-up questions that showed he really understood what he was hearing. Zarathil made a note. Subject demonstrates intense curiosity about mundane agricultural processes. Purpose unclear. She followed Jake to the Environmental Control Center, where he spent 2 hours learning about air recycling systems. Then to the Waste Management Facility, where he praised the engineers for their clever solutions to problems he had never faced himself. "Why do you care about these things?" Zarathil finally asked him directly. Jake turned to her with that bright expression humans seem to wear naturally. "Because it's all connected. The food, the air, the waste systems, they keep everyone alive. The people who designed this station thought about thousands of different species and found ways to make it work for all of them." "That's amazing," Zarathil stared at him. To her people, life support systems were tools. Necessary but not interesting. Jake Morrison looked at them like they were art. Later, she found Ben Carter in the engineering section. He was supposed to be learning about galactic technology standards. Instead, he was arguing with 2 human crew members about their own ship's power systems. "The flow rate through Junction 7 could be improved by 15%, Ben insisted, pointing at a diagram on his datapad. "If we adjust the coupling here and reroute these conduits, we get better efficiency and lower maintenance requirements." "Ben, the engines work fine," said the other engineer, a woman named Kate. "We don't need to rebuild them." "Fine isn't good enough. Ben shot back. They could work better. They should work better. Just because something works doesn't mean we stop trying to improve it. Zarathil watched him pace back and forth, his energy focused entirely on machines that were already functioning perfectly. The Xanthari engineer assigned to guide him looked confused. Why would anyone spend emotional energy on equipment that had no problems? Ben noticed her watching. What do you think? He asked. In your species, do you improve things that already work? We repair things when they break. Zarathil replied carefully. We upgrade systems when requirements change. We do not modify functional equipment for theoretical improvements. Ben grinned. That's the difference between us and everybody else. We see what works and ask how to make it work better. We see what's good and ask how to make it great. He turned back to his diagrams with renewed energy. Zarathil realized he would probably spend all night working on improvements that no one had asked for. The thought disturbed her in ways she could not explain. The next day, she observed Dr. Lisa Yang in the research section. Lisa had been given access to the station's scientific databases as part of the cultural exchange. Most visitors browsed through the information politely, taking notes on things relevant to their fields. Lisa had been in the same chair for 18 hours. Zarathil entered the research center and found Lisa surrounded by data pads, empty food containers, and pages of handwritten calculations. Her hair was messy and her clothes were wrinkled. She had not moved except to get more coffee. Dr. Yang, Zarathil said softly, the research center closes in 6 hours for maintenance. Perhaps you should rest. Lisa looked up with bloodshot eyes. I can't stop now. I'm so close to understanding something incredible. What are you researching? Quantum crystalline matrices, Lisa said, gesturing at her scattered notes. Your people use them for data storage, but I think they might be capable of so much more. If I'm right, these crystals could revolutionize how we think about computing, memory, even consciousness itself. Zarathil examined Lisa's work. The research was not assigned to her. It was not related to her mission. It was not even in her field of expertise. Lisa Yang was studying crystalline matrices because she found them interesting. This research could wait, Zarathil pointed out. You could return to it later. You could assign it to specialists. Lisa stared at her with an expression Zarathil was beginning to recognize. It was the same look Jake Morrison had when he talked about life support systems. The same energy Ben Carter showed when discussing engine improvements. But what if the answer changes everything? Lisa asked. What if tomorrow I discover something that transforms how every species in the galaxy processes information? What if I'm one equation away from a breakthrough that saves lives, improves communications, or helps us understand the universe better? What if you are not? Zarathil countered. What if this research leads nowhere? Lisa smiled tiredly. Then I'll learn something new anyway. Either way, I win. She turned back to her work, completely focused despite her exhaustion. Zarathil left her there, still calculating, still hoping, still burning with curiosity about mysteries that might not even exist. The most disturbing observation came 2 days later in the station's recreation center. Navigator Pete Johnson had volunteered to teach alien children human games during their educational period. Zarathil went to observe, expecting a simple cultural demonstration. Instead, she found Pete on his hands and knees crawling around the floor while a group of young Miloki, Xanthari and Catherian children shrieked with laughter. He was teaching them a game called tag that required no equipment and no complex rules. Just running and touching and more running. The goal is to not get caught, Pete explained to a confused young Xanthari, but also to catch others. And when you're caught, you become the one who catches. This seems inefficient, the child replied with typical Xanthari logic. Pete grinned. It's not about efficiency. It's about fun. He demonstrated by chasing a giggling Miloki child around the room. When he caught her, he cheered louder than she did. When she became the chaser and caught him, he acted dramatically surprised and praised her speed and cleverness. The alien children began to understand. Soon they were running and laughing and celebrating each other's successes like they had discovered the secret to happiness. Zarathil watched Pete encourage a shy Catherian child to join the game. The child's parents had said she was too careful, too afraid of making mistakes. Pete spent 20 minutes gaining her trust, then helped her experience the joy of play without judgment. Why do you care so much? Zarathil asked Pete during a break between games. These children are not your species. Teaching them serves no strategic purpose. Pete wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at the children, who were now organizing their own game without adult help. "Look at them," he said. "They're having fun together. Different species, different worlds, but they're laughing at the same things. That matters." "But why does it matter to you personally?" Pete thought for a moment. "Because if these kids grow up thinking other species are friends instead of strangers, maybe the galaxy becomes a little bit safer. Maybe they remember that we're all just people trying to figure things out, and maybe that prevents a war someday." He paused, then added more quietly, "Or maybe it doesn't change anything big. Maybe it just means these kids had a good day. Sometimes that's enough." Zarathil watched him return to the children with the same energy he had shown at the beginning. He was not tired despite hours of activity. If anything, the children's happiness seemed to fuel his own enthusiasm. That night, Zarathil sat in her quarters and reviewed her observations. The humans displayed consistent patterns of behavior that defied logical explanation. They invested tremendous energy in activities that provided no obvious benefit to themselves or their species. Jake Morrison studied alien systems not to gain advantage, but to satisfy curiosity. Ben Carter improved functioning equipment not because it was broken, but because improvement was possible. Lisa Yang researched topics outside her field not for career advancement, but because knowledge excited her. Pete Johnson taught alien children not for diplomatic gain, but because their happiness mattered to him. They burned bright with passion for everything they encountered. They cared deeply about things that logic suggested should not concern them. They approached each moment like it contained infinite possibilities. Zarathil found herself thinking about them even when she was not observing them. She wondered what drove them to live with such intensity. She began to ask herself a question that felt dangerous to consider. What would it feel like to burn that bright? The alarm started at 347 station time. Zarathil woke instantly, her crystalline body responding to the emergency frequencies. Red lights flashed in her quarters as the station's voice announced the crisis in 12 different languages. Cascade failure in life support sectors 7 through 12. All personnel implement emergency protocols. Non-essential crew report to evacuation stations. Zarathil dressed quickly and made her way to the command center. The corridors filled with beings moving in orderly fashion toward designated safety areas. The Zenthari formed efficient lines. The Miloki carried emergency supplies in organized groups. The Catherian supervisors directed traffic with calm authority. Everyone followed the protocols exactly. Wait for instructions. Conserve resources. Prepare for evacuation if necessary. Let the specialists handle the technical problems. In the command center, Zarathil found chaos of a different kind. The humans were there, but they were not following protocols. Jake Morrison stood beside the station commander, studying damage reports on the main display. "How many people are in the affected sectors?" he asked. "Approximately 800 beings," Commander Threll replied. "We are implementing standard evacuation procedures. What about repair efforts? We have sent engineering teams to assess the damage. Repair may not be possible. The failure affects multiple systems across 6 sectors." Jake nodded grimly. "What do you need?" "Captain Morrison, your concern is appreciated, but this is a station matter. Please report to evacuation area 12 with your crew." Jake looked at the display showing the failing sectors. Families lived there. Children like the ones Pete had taught to play games. Scientists like the ones Lisa had shared research with. Workers like the farming supervisor who had spent hours explaining soil chemistry. "No," Jake said quietly. Commander Threll's tentacles twitched with surprise. "I beg your pardon?" "I said no. My people don't evacuate while others are in danger. What do you need to fix this?" Before Threll could answer, Ben Carter burst into the command center with Kate and 2 other human engineers. They carried toolkits and data pads loaded with station schematics. "Captain, the cascade started in the primary atmospheric processing unit for Sector 7, Ben reported. The failure spread to water recycling, power distribution, and thermal control. The station's automated systems shut everything down to prevent catastrophic damage. "Can it be repaired?" Jake asked. Ben studied his readings. "Maybe. The reactor feeds that power. The affected systems are still intact. If we can bypass the damaged sections and reroute power through the secondary conduits, we might be able to restore basic life support." "Might?" Threll interjected. "The risk is enormous. Those conduits were not designed to carry primary loads. They could fail and cause even more damage. Or they could work and save 800 lives, Ben replied. I'll take that chance. Amy Stevens arrived with a dozen human crew members. Captain, we've reviewed the evacuation routes. The damaged sectors connect to the main corridor system at 4 points. If life support fails completely, people could be trapped during evacuation. What are you suggesting? We set up emergency life support at each connection point. Portable units from our ship. If something goes wrong, we buy time for complete evacuation. Zarathil watched the humans organize themselves with frightening efficiency. They were not following station protocols. They were creating their own solution based on unacceptable levels of risk. Dr. Lisa Yang appeared, carrying equipment Zarathil did not recognize. I've been analyzing the cascade failure pattern, she announced. The automated shutdown was too aggressive. The systems are more damaged by the shutdown sequence than by the original failure. If we can restart them in the right order and monitor the power flows manually, we can stabilize the entire sector. That would require someone to stay in the reactor control center, Threll pointed out. If the restart fails, the person monitoring the systems would not have time to escape. I'll do it, Lisa said without hesitation. Dr. Yang. That is extremely dangerous. Zarathil spoke for the first time. Lisa looked at her with that burning intensity Zarathil had observed before. 800 people, Zarathil. 800 beings who did nothing wrong except live in the wrong place when machines failed. I'm not leaving them to die because of bad luck. Jake Morrison stepped forward. We're doing this. Ben, how long do you need to set up the bypass? 4 hours minimum. 6 to be safe. Amy, how long to position the emergency life support? 2 hours if we start now. Lisa, how long to prep the restart sequence? 3 hours to map the optimal power flow patterns. Jake turned to Commander Threll. We need access to all restricted areas and full authority to modify station systems. Threll's tentacles trembled. I cannot authorize this. The risk to the entire station is too great. Standard procedure is to evacuate the affected areas and await rescue ships. How long until rescue ships arrive? 18 hours. People in those sectors don't have 18 hours. They have maybe 6 before the emergency reserves fail completely. Threll looked around the command center. Other alien species watched the conversation with expressions ranging from confusion to horror. The humans were proposing to risk the entire station to save 800 beings. Zarathil realized she was watching 2 completely different philosophies in action. The aliens saw a crisis and implemented logical solutions. Minimize risk. Protect the majority. Accept losses if necessary. The humans saw people in danger and refused to accept any loss they could prevent. I will take responsibility, Jake declared. If this fails, blame me. But give us the chance to try. The next 6 hours blurred together. Zarathil followed the human teams as they worked with desperate intensity. Ben Carter crawled through reactor shafts that were never meant for beings his size, rerouting power systems while radiation warnings flashed around him. He worked without breaks, driven by the knowledge that 800 lives depended on his calculations. Amy Stevens led teams carrying portable life support units through corridors where the air grew thinner every hour. She positioned her people at maximum risk points, knowing they would be the first to die if the repairs failed. When a young Xanthari volunteer asked if the mission was safe, Amy looked him in the eye and said, "No, but it's right." Lisa Yang sat in the reactor control center, surrounded by displays showing power flows that changed by the second. She had refused all offers to share the duty. This was her plan, her calculations, her responsibility. If someone had to stay in the most dangerous position, it would be her. Zarathil found herself working alongside them without conscious decision. She carried tools for Ben, updated power flow data for Lisa, and helped Amy coordinate between teams. Logic told her to evacuate with the others. Something else told her to stay. As the 6th hour approached, Ben's voice crackled over the communication system. Bypass is ready. All connections are stable. Lisa, we're ready for restart sequence. Lisa's voice came back steady despite her exhaustion. Beginning restart in 30 seconds. All teams to safe positions. Zarathil stood with Amy Stevens in the command center, watching displays that showed the fate of 800 beings. The power flows began to change as Lisa initiated the restart sequence. Systems that had been dark for hours flickered to life. Primary atmospheric processing online, Lisa reported. Power flow stable. Beginning secondary systems restart. One by one, the systems returned to life. Water recycling, thermal control, emergency lighting, artificial gravity. Each success brought cheers from the human teams. But Zarathil watched Amy Stevens's face and saw something that troubled her. Amy was not celebrating. She was watching the displays with the intensity of someone who understood that success could turn to failure in seconds. Why? Zarathil asked suddenly. Why do you burn so fierce? Your emotions, your intensity, your willingness to risk everything. It's inefficient. It's dangerous. Why do you do it? Amy turned to her, and for a moment Zarathil saw something in the human's eyes that she had never seen before. It was not just passion or determination. It was something deeper. Something that explained everything she had observed about the humans. Because if you're not burning, you're not really living, Amy said quietly. The words hit Zarathil like physical force. She understood suddenly that the humans did not see their intensity as a choice. They saw it as the essence of existence itself. To care deeply, to risk greatly, to feel everything with maximum force. This was not how humans chose to live. This was what it meant to be human. All systems stable, Lisa's voice announced over the communication system. Life support restored to full capacity in all sectors. We did it! The command center erupted in cheers from the human teams. Other species watched with expressions of amazement and confusion. The impossible had been accomplished through sheer force of will and refusal to accept defeat. But Zarathil barely heard the celebration. Amy's words echoed in her crystalline mind, opening possibilities she had never considered. What would it feel like to burn that bright? What would it feel like to really live? She found herself wanting to find out. Amy's words changed something inside Zarathil. For the first time in her long existence, she began to question the careful, measured way her people lived. If you're not burning, you're not really living. The phrase repeated in her mind like a song she could not stop hearing. The next day, Zarathil made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. When Ben Carter announced he was conducting additional safety checks on the repaired systems, she volunteered to help. You don't need to do that, Ben told her. The station engineering team can handle routine maintenance. I want to learn, Zarathil replied. The words felt strange in her mouth. Want. Her people dealt in necessities and logical requirements. Wanting was inefficient. Ben studied her for a moment, then smiled. Okay, but I should warn you. I tend to get excited about technical stuff. Zarathil discovered what he meant within the first hour. Ben did not just check systems. He examined them with the intensity of an artist studying a masterpiece. He traced power flows with his fingers while explaining how each component related to every other component. He found tiny inefficiencies that would never cause problems and designed improvements that no one had requested. Look at this, Ben said, pointing to a power coupling junction. The original design routes the flow through 3 separate transformers. But if we modify the coupling to include a bypass circuit here, we can reduce power loss by 0.7%. 0.7% is not significant, Zarathil pointed out. Ben stared at her like she had spoken in an unknown language. Are you kidding? That's a 0.7% improvement in the lives of 800 people. Over a year, that translates to better lighting, more comfortable temperatures, faster computer processing. It matters. Zarathil looked at the coupling junction again. To her crystalline perception, it was functional equipment performing adequately. But Ben saw possibilities. He saw ways to make life better for beings he had never met and would never know. Something shifted inside her chest. A warm feeling she could not identify. For the first time, she began to see the junction through human eyes, not just as working equipment, but as an opportunity to improve the lives of others. Show me how to make the modification, she said. Ben's face lit up with pure joy. For the next 4 hours, they worked together, redesigning circuits and testing improvements. Zarathil found herself caring about power efficiency levels with an intensity that should have alarmed her. Instead, it felt wonderful. When they finished, the improvement worked exactly as Ben had predicted. The lights in Sector 7 became slightly brighter. The air circulation moved slightly faster. The difference was barely noticeable, but Zarathil felt a surge of satisfaction that shocked her with its power. We did that, she said wonderingly. We made life better for hundreds of beings we don't even know. Now you're getting it, Ben grinned. That feeling right there, that's why we burned so fierce. The next day, Zarathil sought out Dr. Lisa Yang. She found Lisa in the research center, working on the crystalline matrix project that had consumed her during the cultural exchange period. "I want to help," Zarathil announced. Lisa looked up from her calculations with surprise. "Really, this is pretty specialized stuff. Are you sure you're interested?" "I'm sure." Lisa explained her theories about using crystalline matrices for advanced computing. Zarathil listened with growing excitement. Lisa was trying to solve problems that Zarathil's own people had considered unsolvable. The audacity of the attempt was thrilling. "Your people have been using these crystals for data storage for thousands of years," Lisa said. "But I think they're capable of actual thought. Not just storing information, but processing it, analyzing it, maybe even creating new ideas." "That is impossible," Zarathil replied automatically. "Crystals cannot think." Lisa's eyes blazed with that familiar human intensity. "Can't they? Your body is crystalline and you think. You analyze. You create ideas. What's the difference between biological crystals and manufactured ones?" Zarathil felt something crack inside her mind. Not painful, but revolutionary. Lisa was right. There was no logical difference between her natural crystalline structure and the manufactured matrices they were studying. "If we could create thinking crystals," Zarathil said slowly, "we could solve computational problems that currently require years of work by teams of specialists." "Exactly. We could model entire star systems, predict weather patterns, maybe even understand consciousness itself." Lisa's enthusiasm was infectious. Zarathil found herself working alongside the human researcher with passion she had never experienced before. They worked for 16 hours straight, forgetting to eat, forgetting to rest, focused entirely on pushing the boundaries of what was possible. When they achieved their first breakthrough, a crystal that could perform basic logical operations, Zarathil experienced something unprecedented. Joy, pure, overwhelming joy that made her whole body resonate with harmonic frequencies. "We did it," she exclaimed, her voice ringing through the research center. "We created artificial thought." Lisa hugged her, and Zarathil hugged back, not caring that physical contact was considered inappropriate by her species. In that moment, the discovery mattered more than cultural protocols. But as the days passed, Zarathil began to notice changes in herself that concerned her. Her carefully controlled emotional responses became erratic. She found herself arguing passionately with other researchers about theories that had never interested her before. She volunteered for dangerous assignments that provided no benefit to her mission. When the station faced a minor technical problem, a simple power fluctuation that posed no real threat, Zarathil insisted on joining the repair team. She worked in maintenance shafts that were cramped and uncomfortable, driven by a need to help that she could not explain. Her crystalline structure began to show signs of stress. Tiny fractures appeared along her limbs where the geometric patterns had always been perfect. Her natural luminescence flickered irregularly instead of maintaining its usual steady glow. Ambassador Krell called her to his office with expressions of concern. "Zarathil, your behavior has become erratic," he said carefully. "Your people have contacted me with questions about your reports. They say your writing has become emotional and unscientific." "My reports are accurate," she replied, though she knew he was right. Her recent communications with the Kitherian collective had been filled with enthusiastic descriptions of human achievements rather than cold analysis. "Perhaps you should return to normal observation protocols. Maintain proper distance from the subjects." But Zarathil could not go back to cold observation. She had tasted what it felt like to care deeply about outcomes. She had experienced the intoxicating rush of working toward goals that mattered more than logic or efficiency. The crisis came during what should have been a routine maintenance operation. A minor atmospheric recycling unit needed replacement in one of the station's secondary sections. Normally, the job would take a small team 2 hours with minimal risk. But Zarathil had noticed something in the technical specifications that the other engineers missed. The replacement unit was slightly less efficient than the original. The difference was tiny, less than 2%. But it would affect air quality for the beings who lived in that section. "We should modify the installation to compensate for the efficiency loss," she announced during the briefing. The station engineers looked at her with confusion. "The replacement meets all safety standards," the chief engineer replied. "Modification is unnecessary." "But we can do better," Zarathil insisted, her voice rising with passion she could not control. We can make the air cleaner, the circulation more efficient. Why settle for adequate when we can achieve excellence? Because adequate is sufficient, the engineer said firmly. We do not take unnecessary risks for minimal improvements. Zarathil felt the human fire burning inside her chest, demanding action. These beings deserved better than adequate. They deserved the best possible life support systems, just like the 800 people Ben Carter had risked everything to save. I'll make the modifications myself, she declared. Against all protocols, she took extra equipment and began working on improvements that no one had authorized. She crawled through maintenance shafts, her crystalline body cracking under the stress of unusual positions and intense physical activity. The work required precise adjustments to power couplings and airflow regulators. As she made each modification, Zarathil felt the same satisfaction Ben had shown her. She was making life better for others even if they never knew her name. But her body was not designed for such intensity. The constant emotional strain and physical stress pushed her crystalline structure beyond its limits. The fractures that had started as hairline cracks began to spread. In the confined space of the maintenance shaft, working by the light of her own flickering luminescence, Zarathil reached for a power coupling that would complete the installation. As her fingers touched the connection, pain shot through her entire body. The fractures spread rapidly across her arms and torso. Her crystalline structure, evolved for careful stability over millennia, could not handle the intensity of human-style passion. She was burning too bright, too fast, experiencing emotions her biology was never meant to contain. She collapsed in the maintenance shaft, her body fragmenting. Zarathil woke in the medical bay 3 days later. Her crystalline body lay in a specialized healing chamber designed for her species, surrounded by harmonic frequencies that encouraged cellular repair. The fractures that had spread across her structure were slowly closing, but she could feel they would never completely disappear. Dr. Lisa Yang sat beside the healing chamber, reading research notes. When she saw Zarathil's eyes open, she smiled with relief. "You scared us," Lisa said softly. "Your people said you nearly suffered complete structural collapse." "What happened in that maintenance shaft?" Zarathil tried to speak but found her voice weak. The intense emotions she had experienced over the past weeks had changed something fundamental in her vocal harmonics. She sounded different now, less perfect, more human. "I burned too bright," she whispered. Jake Morrison entered the medical bay carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Lisa and pulled up a chair next to Zarathil's chamber. "The modifications you made worked perfectly," he told her. "Air quality in Section 12 improved by 8%. The beings who live there will breathe easier because of what you did." "Was it worth it?" Zarathil asked. Jake studied her fractured form for a long moment. "That's not for me to decide. Only you can say if what you gained was worth what you lost." Zarathil considered this. The pain of her injuries was real. The damage to her crystalline structure would never fully heal. Her people would look at her differently now, marked by her contact with human intensity. But she had also experienced something no member of her species had ever felt before. "I understand now," she said finally, "why you burn so fierce, and why I cannot." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "Tell me, your species evolved to use passion as a tool. When humans faced dangers on your world, the ones who cared most deeply survived. The ones who fought hardest for their families lived long enough to have children. The ones who refused to give up found solutions that careful logic missed." She paused, gathering strength to continue. "Over thousands of generations, you became a species that burns bright because burning bright keeps you alive. Your emotions are not separate from your intelligence. They are part of it. You think with your hearts as much as your minds." Lisa nodded slowly. "And your people? We evolved differently. We faced different challenges. Careful analysis and measured responses kept us alive. We became logical because logic was what we needed to survive. But that means we cannot safely contain the kind of fire that drives you." Jake Morrison sat back in his chair. "That fire is dangerous even for us. We burn ourselves out sometimes. We make mistakes because we care too much. We take risks that kill us." "But you also perform miracles," Zarathil replied. "You save 800 lives because you refuse to accept that some people must die. You improve systems that already work because better is always possible. You care about strangers like they are family." Amy Stevens entered the medical bay carrying a datapad with reports from the past 3 days. She approached Zarathil's healing chamber with obvious concern. How are you feeling? Amy asked. Changed, Zarathil answered honestly. I touched your fire and was burned by it. But I also learned what it means to truly live. Amy looked at the fractures still visible across Zarathil's structure. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to be hurt by trying to understand us. I am not sorry, Zarathil said firmly. My people need to understand what you are. Not just that you are passionate, but why you are passionate. You are not reckless beings who act without thinking. You are a species that has turned caring into a weapon against the universe's indifference. Over the next few days, as Zarathil's strength returned, she completed her final reports for the Catherian Collective. The documents were unlike anything her people had ever received from a cultural observer. Humans represent a fundamental challenge to our understanding of intelligent life, she wrote. They have weaponized emotion in ways that make them simultaneously the most dangerous and most valuable potential allies in the galaxy. She described how human passion drove them to impossible achievements, how their refusal to accept defeat led to solutions that pure logic never discovered, how their willingness to risk everything for strangers created bonds between species that had never existed before. They do not burn fierce by choice, her report continued. They burn fierce because it is what they are. Asking humans to be less passionate is like asking stars to shine less brightly. It is not possible without destroying what makes them what they are. But she also warned about the dangers. Human intensity can be overwhelming to species not adapted for it. Extended contact with human emotion can destabilize beings whose psychology is based on careful control. They should be approached with respect for their power and understanding of their nature. Her final recommendation surprised even herself. Despite the risks, alliance with humans offers opportunities that cannot be found elsewhere in the galaxy. They will fight for principles they believe in, even when those principles offer no personal benefit. They will risk their lives for beings they barely know. They will push boundaries that other species accept as immutable. In short, humans make the impossible possible. This is both their greatest strength and their greatest threat to galactic stability. When the time came for the human delegation to leave Serenity's Edge, Zarathil went to the docking bay to say goodbye. Her fractured form moved slowly, but she had insisted on seeing them off personally. Ben Carter approached her with a small device in his hands. I made this for you, he said, offering her a crystalline matrix unlike any she had ever seen. It's based on the research you and Lisa did together. It can't think like we hoped, but it can process emotions and translate them into mathematical equations. Why would I need such a device? Zarathil asked. Ben smiled. So you can remember what it felt like to burn bright without risking your structure again. Sometimes memories of fire are enough to keep you warm. Lisa Yang hugged her carefully, mindful of the healing fractures. Thank you for showing us that intelligence and passion can exist in the same being. We learned as much from you as you learned from us. Amy Stevens shook her hand with the formal respect due to a fellow researcher. You came closer to understanding us than any other species has managed. I hope that knowledge serves your people well. Jake Morrison was the last to say goodbye. He looked at her fractured form with obvious regret. I'm sorry you were hurt by trying to understand us, he said. Zarathil considered his words carefully. I was not hurt by trying to understand you. I was hurt by trying to become you. Understanding is possible. Becoming is not. What will you tell your people about us? That you are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Zarathil replied. And also the most necessary. Jake raised an eyebrow. Both? You make other species want to be better than they are. You inspire improvement through example, but you also set standards that can destroy those who try to match them without understanding the cost. She paused, then added softly, You showed me what it means to truly care about outcomes. That knowledge will stay with me forever, even if I can never again burn as bright as you do. The human delegation boarded their ship and departed Serenity's Edge. Zarathil watched through the viewing port as the New Horizon jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew of impossibly passionate beings back to their corner of the galaxy. She returned to her quarters and began preparing for her own journey home. The Catherian Collective would want detailed briefings about her experiences. They would study her reports and debate the implications of human passion for galactic civilization. But as she packed her research materials, Zarathil found herself looking at the emotion processing device Ben had given her. She activated it and fed it the memory of working with him to improve the power systems. The device hummed softly and displayed equations that described the mathematical beauty of caring about strangers. For just a moment, she felt an echo of that wonderful burning sensation. Controlled now, contained within safe limits but still recognizably the fire that had nearly destroyed her. She understood finally that this was the gift humans offered to the galaxy. Not their fire itself, which few species could safely contain, but the knowledge that such fire was possible. The inspiration to burn brighter than logic suggested was reasonable. As her ship departed Serenity's edge, Zarathil looked back at the station where 800 beings continued to live because humans had refused to accept their deaths. Where air flowed cleaner in Section 12 because humans believed improvement was always possible. Where alien children played games that taught them other species could be friends. The humans had left, but their fire continued to burn in the lives they had touched. Perhaps that was the real miracle. Not that they burned so fierce, but that their fire could light other flames without consuming them. Zarathil carried that flame home with her, safely contained but never extinguished. In her crystalline memory, the echo of human passion would burn forever, a reminder that some fires were beautiful to observe, dangerous to touch, and impossible to forget. The galaxy was a brighter place because humans burned in it, and Zarathil was grateful she had been brave enough to get close enough to feel their warmth, even if she could never again touch their flame.